The dual blades are fast, agile weapons that allow you to deal a lot of damage as you gap close to the monster and dodge incoming attacks, becoming more powerful as you do so. They're some of the best weapons at applying elemental damage as well as any kind of ailments, and are the masters of mobility in Monster Hunter Wilds. In today's video I'm going to be sharing with you the best builds for the dual blades, going from raw damage to elemental builds that are more focused on comfort or applying ailments such as paralysis to the monster. And I'll be sure to give you guys a few other options if you don't want to use the Artian weapons, so that you are free to use whichever dual blades you prefer. And we're even going to include one build that utilizes maximum might on the dual blades to deal a lot more damage. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero and let's get started. So let's start by talking about the elemental builds. I'm going to start by laying down the groundwork, that is to say the armor pieces we're going to be using, and we're going to be building upon that, as the build isn't going to change too much depending on the element you use, unless you want to optimize a couple of things. So for the elemental build, we're going to be using the Guardian Ebony Helm Beta, the Arc Vulcan Mail Beta, Guardian Ebony Braces Alpha, the Gormagala Coil Beta, and the Gormagala Greaves Beta. And finally for the talisman, we're going with the Exploiter Charm 2. This combination of armor pieces is going to give us two different set bonuses, those being the Burst Boost one, which will extend the duration of the Burst skill and give us even more attack while it is active, and we're going to be able to maintain Burst active for a very long time very easily, as we're able to hit multiple times with the dual blades each time we go for an attack, and again we have all of that extra mobility to stay close to the monster, always dealing damage. So it's safe to say that Burst is one of the best fitting skills for the dual blades. And by having two pieces of the Gormagala armor set, we're going to get the Black Eclipse one, which of course will inflict you with frenzy when fighting against a large monster, not only giving you an attack boost but also giving you 15% affinity once you beat the frenzy virus. One thing that you will notice about the dual blades and in general other weapons that consume stamina is that we can't rely on skills like maximum might to increase our affinity, because it is constantly going to be drained. However, as I said at the beginning, there is an exception with one of these builds that actually uses maximum might, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. Now for the decorations, we're then going to add 3 Phoenix Jewels, 2 Tenderizer Jewels, 1 Chain Jewel, and 2 Saint Jewels, and we're going to end up with some very powerful skills. Weakness Exploit is of course there to improve our affinity, giving us a 30% affinity so long as we are hitting a monster's weak spot, and the additional 20% affinity that you get whenever you are hitting on a monster's wound is something that I don't really count, as more often than not you're going to be breaking the wound on the same combo that you apply it, so we're not going to be getting a lot of benefit out of that 20% affinity, but it's more so a bonus. But we're still going to be able to have a ton of affinity with the build, even if you discount that additional 20%. Burst 5 is of course going to allow us to deal a lot more damage, especially in combination with the Burst Boost skill that we get from the Auto Garon pieces, and Antivirus 3 is of course going to combine perfectly with the Gormagala set bonus that is going to inflict us with the frenzy bonus, and whenever we overcome it we get some additional affinity, and this also makes it so that we can overcome the frenzy even quicker. Now this skill is actually mistranslated. It states that it gives you 15% affinity, but it actually gives you 10% additional affinity. So it's a little bit worse than it says on the print, but it is still a very powerful offensive skill that we can take by only taking a couple of level 1 decoration slots. We're also going to be getting Coalescence level 3, which is a very powerful damage boost, as you're able to deal a lot more elemental damage or apply a lot more status by having Coalescence active, which combines very well with the Gormagala set, as whenever you overcome the frenzy, Coalescence becomes active, so there is a lot of synergy there. On top of that, we also get Constitution level 2, Divine Blessing 1, and Flinch Free 1, which are decent skills to have for sure, especially Constitution, given that we're going to be managing our stamina all of the time with the dual blades, but these are just bonuses on top. Now for the weapons, of course, the best choice is always going to be the Artian weapons. I'll go over some of the alternatives in a moment, but if you want to use the Artian weapons, I would advise you to go for something kind of like this, where you put all affinity infusions on the production bonus, because we don't have a lot of affinity on our build, and then try to get 1 or 2 sharpness boosts, and the rest would be elemental boost on the reinforcement bonuses. So on my own roll, I would personally replace 1 affinity boost and 1 sharpness boost, and trade them for elemental boosts, so that I would have 1 sharpness and 4 elemental. With this, you end up with 20 to 25% affinity on your dual blade, blades depending on the reinforcement bonuses you end up with, which combined with the 30% affinity you get from weakness exploit, again not counting those additional 20%, and accounting for Black Eclipse and antivirus, giving you 25% more affinity, you basically end up with 75% affinity, or in my case 80% affinity, which is the usual sweet spot that I like to go for. Now as for your weapons decorations, these are going to change depending on the element that you are using. So for example, for my Thunder Dual Blades, I would use a Bolt Jewel 3 to get Thunder Attack 3. However, if you are lucky, you may end up with a Thunder Attack 3 with Crit Element 1, which is of course going to be better, as it will allow you to deal more elemental damage whenever you land critical hits. Now, critical element isn't particularly impressive in this game, so we're not going to be maxing it out, and we're just treating it as a bonus. So much so that if you don't have it and you can instead go with Thunder Attack 3 and Handicraft 1, that would also be a very good option. We then slot in Critical Boost 3, which is going to increase the damage dealt from our critical hits from 25% to 34%. You could then use the final slot to add yet another Critical Boost decoration, which would max out your critical hit damage to 40%, but in my opinion, you would be much better off adding a decoration that can help you with your sharpness, since maintaining your white sharpness level is going to allow you to deal much more damage than the difference between Crit Boost 3 and Crit Boost 5. You could take, for example, Master's Touch, which I only recommend you to take if you have 80% or higher affinity at all times, as it does require you to land critical hits for this to take effect. Alternatively, you could go for a Handicraft 3 decoration, or an even better option in my opinion would be to go for a Razor Sharp 3 with Handicraft 1 decoration that is going to give you a 50% chance to not lose any sharpness whenever you attack, and also give you 10 units of white sharpness as part of the Handicraft level 1. And by having this decoration, you essentially make it so that you don't have to take a sharpness boost in your reinforcement bonus, as you're going to be dealing with your sharpness on the weapons decoration. And so depending on your weapons element, simply change out the decoration to improve the corresponding element, and you're going to have a very powerful build that you can very easily swap around the decorations, and it's going to be near perfect, albeit you'll be relying on the RNG to go your way whenever you craft the Artian weapons. That said, what about the non-Artian weapons? Which dual blades would I recommend you to use if you don't want to go for these? That is to say, what are some of the best dual blades you can craft that are going to perform similarly to the Artian dual blades? One very solid option is the Wyvern Lovers, as it already comes with white sharpness, has 10% affinity, 200 raw and 200 fire element, with some solid decoration slots, and already comes with Crit Boost 3, which is one of the skills that we would take for the decoration slots we would use. This dual blade is going to perform only slightly below the Artian dual blades with a fire element because it has a lower raw attack. But again, given that it has the head start by having Crit Boost 3 as the equipment skill, it's going to make it very easy for you to craft the perfect build for this weapon. But alternatively, the Guardian Rathalos dual blades are also quite good, having 210 raw attack with 15% affinity and crit element and Master's Touch for the skills. The Jindaha dual blades are a pretty powerful ice alternative, giving you the same raw damage but giving you 300 ice element, which is a ton of elemental value with some good decorations and white sharpness, but it comes with the skill Focus on the weapon. Focus is not ideal on the dual blades, it helps you build up your demon gauge a lot quicker, but you can already do it so quickly that it honestly just ends up feeling like a waste if you take Focus for that express purpose. The Master Sabers are a competent alternative for the water element, though they do end up lacking in some raw damage, and again they come with the skill Focus. And for the dragon element, the Gormagala dual blades are especially appealing because of the 20% affinity, a lot of white sharpness with crit element 3, so it'll be easy to build around them, though alternatively you can take the Arkvel dual blades that have a much higher 220 raw attack with 200 dragon and similar sharpness, but you end up losing the affinity and you end up with Focus once again, which isn't a powerful skill. That said, we're not done with the elemental builds just yet, as when it comes to the dragon element specifically, there is a different build that I think would allow you to deal much more damage, and that would be to take a mix of the Arkveld set with the Gormagala pieces, using the Arc Vulcan Helm beta, Gormagala Mail beta, Arc Vulcan Vambraces beta, Goracoil beta, the Arc Vulcan Greaves beta with the Exploiter Charm, and then by adding the following decorations, we're able to end up with a very powerful offensive build that puts us at 75% affinity, again not counting the additional 20% affinity from Weakness Exploit 5, with Dragon Attack 3, Constitution level 3, Coalescence level 3, Antivirus 3, and you even get 1 point of Burst and Ambush for additional damage, and 2 points of Evade Window for additional comfort. But the important piece piece here is Convert Element. This skill makes it so that whenever you take elemental damage, you will gain a massive boost to your dragon elemental damage, and you will also proc additional hits of dragon damage as you attack. The cool part about Convert Element is that this skill actually works with the perfect dodge on the dual blades, meaning that you don't need to get hit and fall on the ground for the skill to take effect. You can keep attacking the monster and you're going to be able to trigger the skill by simply dodging, which is of course part of the gameplay loop of the dual blades, and it will be made even easier by having evade window level 2. And if you are focusing on dealing as much dragon damage as possible, you can even go with crit element 3 and you'll be able to deal some massive dragon elemental damage. Now, given the state of the game, I don't think there is currently a monster that benefits you from going so hard into the dragon element, so you would be better off using crit boost instead of crit element. Now, as for the status ailment builds, they're actually pretty similar to what we already had going on, using the Guardian Ebony Odogaron helmet and Vambraces, the Arc Vulcan Mail beta, and the Gorquel and Greaves beta as well. And the decorations, we're going for pretty much the same idea, but of course, instead of having an element on our weapon, we're going to have paralysis like I have on this Artian dual blades, which I'm going to be adding a Paralyzer Jewel 3 to make it so I can proc paralysis more often, and this is going to allow me to paralyze a monster 5-6 times per hunt, provided I'm not able to defeat the monster before I get that many paralysis. On the Artian weapons, the reinforcement bonuses are going to look pretty much the same as before. You can either go flat attack on the production bonus or full on affinity to make it easier for you to get those critical hits, and then for the reinforcement bonus, go full on elemental boost with 1, maybe 2 sharpness boosts depending on how you feel about sharpness. Me personally, because I don't have as much affinity with this build as I have with some others, I don't go for Master's Touch and I go for Razor Sharp and Handicraft, and I have 2 sharpness boosts that are pretty much going to guarantee I don't run out of sharpness. And of course, if you're using a Blast dual blades, for example, the build is going to be exactly the same, but you would be replacing the Paralyzer Jewel for a Blast Attack Jewel. Now, the next build is one more focused on comfort and also making sure that you can have a ton of affinity active at all times. It's not going to be quite as effective as the other builds in the video, but I would argue that it's still competitive with them, and it's going to do more than fine against any monster in the game, even upcoming content. So for this build, we're using the Guardian Fulgur Helmet beta, the Arc Vulcan Mail beta, the Guardian Arc Valve Vambraces, the Gormagala Coil and Greaves beta, and the Challenger Charm. We then add 3 Phoenix Jewels, 2 Tenderizer Jewels, 1 Challenger Jewel, and 2 Saint Jewels, and we end up with these 3 level 1 slots that you can do anything you want with. But ultimately, you end up with Weakness Exploit 5, Agitator 5, on top of Coalescence, Antivirus, and of course the 2-piece Gormagala, which is going to give you a ton of affinity, therefore is going to make it super easy for you to maintain the Master's Touch active. And again, you have these level 1 decoration slots that you can, for example, use to get Divine Blessing 3, which would give you 50% damage reduction. You could go for Recovery Hub to increase the amount of healing you get, Constitution or Marathon Runner to help with your stamina management, or any other level 1 slot that you would like to use. This build is going to give you a lot of options and is going to work well in all situations. And of course, for the weapon, simply go with what I explained before, so that is 1 crit boost, 1 elemental / ailment decoration, and 1 decoration for your sharpness management, which in this case, because we have so much affinity with this build, Master's Touch is going to be the best option. That said, it's time for us to talk about the maximum might builds that I talked about in the intro. And let me tell you, these are actually the strongest dual blades builds in the entire video, but they require a very specific playstyle, given that if played normally, you're going to be running out of stamina very quickly with the dual blades, and thus maximum might is not going to be active. So this is a very specific setup that is going to work with a specific combo that I'm going to be showing you after I show you the build, so it's important to pay attention to both things, because if played normally, this build is going to be performing suboptimally. So for this build, we're using a very different combination of armor pieces, starting with the Guardian Fulgur Engineer Helmet beta as well as the Mail beta, followed by a 2-piece Gormagala Vambraces and Coil beta, with the Raidal Greaves beta, and finally the Challenger Charm 2. We're using the 2-piece Gormagala as before to get the Black Eclipse to get some additional affinity that we're going to be further boosting with Antivirus. Now, the Fulgur Engineer is very important here, as it's going to give us the second wind set bonus. This is basically going to be giving you a secondary stamina bar, and that is what is going to allow us to use maximum might with the dual blades. But if you stay in demon mode for too long, you're not going to be able to take advantage of maximum might for most of the hunt, so give me a moment before we talk about the right combo. So for the rest of the build, we add a couple of maximum might decorations, 3 Saint Ancient Jewels, 3 Phoenix Jewels once again, 1 Challenger Jewel, and 1 Chain Jewel. And because we have a free level 1 decoration, we add in Sprinter as well. And we end up with Agitator level 5, which is going to give us 20 flat attack and 15% affinity whenever the monster is enraged. And it's actually pretty easy to enrage the monster in this game, especially if you start the hunt right. You can make a monster enrage very quickly and get a lot of benefit out of this skill. Constitution 3 is going to help with our stamina, making it so that actions that deplete the stamina will be reduced by 30%. And of course we get Maximum Might 3, which is going to increase our affinity by 30% while it's active, which is a massive boon for our build. And of course we get once again Coalescence and Antivirus together with Burst 1, which gives you a ton of damage for a single level 3 decoration. And Latent Power level 1 is actually quite good as well, giving you 10% affinity and reducing your stamina depletion by 30% whenever it is active. Now the thing about Latent Power is that you have to either take damage or wait a certain amount of time in the hunt before it actually becomes active. However, if you use the Corrupted Mental that drains your health over time, on top of being the best mental that gives you flat attack and additional affinity, the damage that you take counts towards activating Latent Power much quicker, thus making the skill even more effective. And then of course we also have Marathon Runner level 1, which is going to further help maintaining our stamina. And of course for the weapon decorations, just go with the ones I showed you before, depending on the element or the ailment you're using on your dual blades. So again, given that we have the set bonus from Fulgur Engineath, you can see the secondary stamina bar right there on the right. Whenever I go into demon mode, it starts depleting that secondary stamina bar, and only after that finishes will it go into the actual stamina. And as you can see, I lost my maximum might finally. So the way we're going to be playing with this build is very different. As I said before, you're going to want to go in and quickly build up your demon gauge like this. And now you have it at full. And once your demon gauge is full and you are not in demon mode, you are in what is called the Archdemon mode. You maintain the improved dodge, and whenever you do these dodges, your demon gauge is going to be depleted, as well as when you attack. Well, the idea is, while you are in demon mode, you're going to be repeating the same combo over and over again, and that is triangle, triangle, circle. So that is a double slash into a demon flurry. On an Xbox controller, that is Y followed by YB. And on the mouse and keyboard, that is left click followed by left click and right click at the same time. And honestly, just this combo deals a ton of damage. It's by far the best damage dealing combo with the dual blades, and it's even better whenever you wear the Corrupted Mantle, as you get secondary hits with the triangle attack. So while Archdemon mode is active, you simply spam this combo and the damage you deal is going to be going up through the roof. Now, of course, many of you may dislike this playstyle either because it hurts your hands, you don't find it comfortable, or you just don't find it fun and don't want to be spamming the same buttons over and over again. And if that is the case, that is perfectly fine. Simply play with one of the previously shown builds and not this final one, as that one is dedicated to this playstyle specifically, and honestly, I totally understand if you dislike it. I'm gonna be making many more builds for more weapons, and of course I'll be updating my builds once Title Update 1 releases, as crafting builds is always one of my favorite aspects of a Monster Hunter game. So if you enjoy these builds and you are excited for that, please subscribe to the channel as it helps me out a lot. My name is Dark Hero, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, happy hunting!